Kuf Chaf Tes Amid Base.
We're on.
Kuf Lamed Amid Base 130b, and we're in the middle of explaining a statement of Rav. So again, just to review, we have three areas of private domain in an alleyway courtyard house. There was a house, there were multiple houses in a courtyard and multiple courtyards in an alleyway. Each one of those are separate designations. So you in the house, which is an enclosed area, carry within there. Within the courtyard itself, as an enclosed area, you can carry in there. However, unless the multiple homes in the courtyard made an eruv, which is a joint meal between them, you may not carry from the house into the courtyard or vice versa. The Gemara had asked about if you have multiple courtyards within a alleyway and they didn't make a joint meal, a partnership in a meal in the alleyway, whether you're allowed to carry within the alleyway, but you're for sure allowed to carry within the courtyard. If they make a joint meal, you can carry from the courtyard to the alleyway. So again, we have the house to the courtyard, that needs an eruv, and which is a joint meal. And from the courtyard to the alleyway, you also need a joint meal. So if you can imagine an alleyway that has four courtyards in them, and each one of the courtyards has multiple homes. Let's say 2 houses per courtyard, and they need an eruv for a joint meal in the courtyard, and each one of them separately, and then each of the courtyards combined will then join in a meal in the alleyway, which would make that an eruv. Rav had said that if they did not make the partnership to the alleyway, so but the houses did make an eruv with the courtyards, so then you're not allowed to carry within the alleyway. If, however, the houses did not make a partnership in the courtyard, then you could carry in the courtyard itself, in the alleyway itself. So the Gemara explained what was the reason for that. The Amarav, and this is the last line, this we're up to. Marav l'tamei the Amarav, ein mavoi nitur belechi v'koira, a mavoi, which is an alleyway, which has walls surrounding it, and at the opening, it's going to have either a vertical post or a horizontal post. You need both the houses and the courtyards open to it. And by definition, and we're now on Kuf Lamed Aleph, 131a at the top. By definition, every courtyard requires multiple houses, and every alleyway requires multiple courtyards, which have multiple houses. And therefore, you need to have both of those connections in order for it in order for you to be allowed to carry in the alleyway, which has at its opening not a proper wall, but either a vertical post or horizontal post, which a vertical post is called the lechi, the horizontal post is called the kora. Now, what's going on over here is that if the houses made an eruv in the courtyard and the courtyard made an eruv in the alleyway, so of course you could carry in the alleyway. But if the houses made a eruv within the courtyard, but the courtyard did not make an eruv, which is called shituf mavois, a joint meal, in the for the alleyway, so then the courtyards are not combined to the alleyway, and you can't carry because you do have houses that, and therefore essentially the courtyard becomes a part of the house. So you don't have courtyards, you have a house, because they made a joint meal within the courtyard, so it became one large house. However, if the houses did not make a joint meal, So then you have courtyards that are independent of the house, and therefore you can carry. You just have the houses, but you don't have the courtyards. So he says, well, the truth is, even if they didn't make the eruv, and you can't say that the courtyard is one large house, and therefore you're not allowed to carry in the street. The same is true the other way around. If they did not make a joint meal in the courtyard, meaning the two houses in courtyard A never made a joint meal, and each house is independent, and you may not carry from the house to the courtyard or the courtyard to the house. There you say that the street is on the alleyway allowed to carry on its own, within its own. Why? Why don't we say, since the houses didn't make a joint meal with the courtyard, so house A in courtyard 1 and house B in courtyard 1 never made a joint meal. And since they never made a joint meal, you cannot carry from either of the houses into the courtyard or to each other, and from the courtyard into either of the houses. So the houses are boarded up, essentially, not physically, but halachically boarded up, which means I only have a courtyard and no houses. And Rav says you need minimally 2 houses in a courtyard and minimally 2 courtyards in a alleyway in order for it to count as an alleyway. So chatzeres ika batim leka, you have the courtyards, but the houses are missing because the houses are boarded up halachically on account of that you're not allowed to carry from the courtyard into the house or vice versa. So Gemara says, well, actually, there's a way that you can carry from one house to the courtyard. If the other owner, if apartment A in the courtyard, in the courtyard 1 says, you know what, I give up my rights for this Shabbos, I give up my rights to the courtyard. So then there are no partners in the courtyard at all. Only apartment B, which is a single house and a single courtyard, and therefore they're allowed to carry from the house to the courtyard to the house. Because the owner of apartment A relinquished rights to the joint space in the courtyard. The Mavatli Rishuse, the Kulu Legabechad, all of them to one. So there's only one house and one courtyard, and therefore he's allowed to carry. So if bias ikka batim leka, that wouldn't help us because according to Rav, a minimum to be required, a minimum to be designated as a courtyard means that you have 2 houses in there. And it's true, you now have one open house to the courtyard because you can carry from the house to the courtyard to the house, but you cannot carry from multiple houses, and that's required. So the Gemara says, "Efshe the mitzafra vat palga the yoma leka legabechad palga the yoma panya legabechad." So well, actually, he says that maybe they could split the day. And apartment A says, from morning until noon, it'll be the courtyard's entirely yours, and I relinquish my rights to the joint space. But after that, you will relinquish your rights to the courtyard to me. So now the courtyard has 2 houses, one house in the morning and one house in the afternoon that are open to it. So if the Gemara says, no, that doesn't work because you never have simultaneously 2 houses open to a courtyard in order to designate it as a courtyard, which needs to be open to the alley. So we're basically looking for a way to designate the courtyard as a courtyard, which requires 2 houses, and those houses have to be open to the courtyard. And what Rav is saying is that even though that physically and structurally you have an opening, 2 houses open to a courtyard, what you don't have is a halachic opening to the courtyard, because you cannot carry from the house to the courtyard. And therefore, the courtyard itself doesn't have a courtyard designation, and the alleyway won't have its designation either, because an alleyway needs a courtyard.
So we're talking about that they're mafkir they're mafkir on a tanai for a certain amount of time of the day. Is that the idea?
No, this is a different process. This is called mavatal reshusei legabi. It's not a hefker. I'm not relinquishing my ownership of the space. I'm relinquishing my rights for Shabbos to the space. That's different. I'm still an owner of the space. I'm just going to relinquish my usage rights for today.
And hefker wouldn't work here?
Well, yeah, but then you lose your property.
But I mean, you could be mafkir for like 5 hours.
I don't know if that works. This is in Erevin, we'll see this process more.
Right.
And there's a concept of for Shabbos, relinquishing my rights to the specific space.
Right.
Which designates, which will have a halachic designation of space. Essentially, we're looking for if you think of law and how you designate your own company. If it's an LLC, it's one thing. If it's a C Corp, it's another thing. We're looking for how do we designate this space? Is it a courtyard that everyone has rights to from these houses, and the houses are open and allowed to carry in there? So then you have houses and a courtyard. If you don't have the use from the house to the courtyard, so then it's not designated as a courtyard. I mean, physically, structurally, it's a courtyard. And physically, structurally, these are houses. But the structure of a house is not what we're looking for. We're looking for the designation of a house. And for that, we need a personal living space that is open to a communal joint courtyard space, and another living space individual open to a joint courtyard space. That's the designation Rav has: 2 houses per minimally 2 houses per courtyard, and that courtyard has to be open to an alleyway. And then that's how we're going to designate you're allowed to carry in that alleyway itself. And this joint meal in the alleyway, in the courtyard, makes it permissible to carry from the house to the courtyard. And if you're missing that, you don't have 2 houses and a courtyard. So why is it that Rav says if you have the houses did not make an eruv to the courtyard, that it won't block the carrying of the alleyways? Because the houses are not there. What makes the designation of the courtyard that you're not allowed to carry there? The houses, and the houses are not there, or are not considered there. So now we're back to all this was to explain the opinion of Rabbi Shimon and to explain the question we had of how you carry in rabbinic spaces, how Rabbi Shimon said to carry in rabbinic spaces for a bris, the preparatory acts for a bris, such as bringing the knife. Taking it back to the conversation about preparation on Shabbos, not only to do the mitzvah, but to prepare for the mitzvah. We're going to see that even though that Rabbi Eliezer said as halacha here in regards to bris milah, this is true for most other mitzvahs as well, but not all. So Rabbi Yechanan said, "Lo lechol amar Rabbi Eliezer machshir mitzvah deicha Shabbos." Not all matters did Rabbi Yechanan say that not only the mitzvah will supersede Shabbos, meaning you could do the mitzvah on Shabbos, but even the prep for the mitzvah would be allowed to be done on Shabbos. But not all mitzvahs. And later the Gemara is going to tell us which not. The Gemara says where we learn this halacha from. Sharei shtei alechem, because the 2 breads of Shavuos. We have the mitzvah of bringing bread, which is unique. Usually you don't bring chametz bread. Here's 2, and they are a part of a korban, 2 loaves for Shavuos. And obviously they'll go on the mizbeach because you're not allowed to put bread on the mizbeach, but rather it goes to the mizbeach, and it's a part of the mincha korban of Shavuos. And those are docha Shabbos. They supersede Shabbos. they are an obligation of the day, meaning it must be done on Shavuos itself, on the Yontif. And yet, Rabbi Eliezer did not say as a general rule, of course, and you can not only can you bring the korban, but you even bake it and cook it and cut the wheat, etc. But he learned that from a special teaching, a word comparison to the Omer. The Tanya, as we learned, how do we know that not only the two breads, but also the prep for the two breads to cut the wheat and grind it and thresh it, winnow it, grind it, sift it, knead it, all of that can be done on Shabbos. How do we know the Torah says in regards to the Omer that they have to be brought and you will bring the Omer, the first of your harvest. And by the two breads, it says from your households, from your dwelling places, you will bring an uplifting bread or a waving bread, two breads, each one to Esrodim. Mahava Amura be'omer machshir deches Shabbos. Just as by the Omer, the prep also supersedes Shabbos, and you would do it even on Shabbos. So too by the two breads, machshir deches Shabbos. And what is the deches Shabbos, the superseding Shabbos in the prep for the Omer? The Omer needs to be cut. Needs to be the sickle to the stalk is what the pasuk says, and we have a drasha. The pasuk says that in plowing and harvesting and in cutting down and reaping, you will rest on Shabbos. And we say just as plowing, there's never a mitzvah to plow. And so plowing must be a personal choice and not a mitzvah. So too, the rest on Shabbos in regards to reaping, in regards to the beginning of the harvest, is also going to be only on a personal choice of reaping. But there's an obligation to reap. And when do we have an obligation to cut down wheat? Actually, barley, that you have to cut down grain. That is only in Omer. The rest of them, there is no mitzvah in Ketzira. The only mitzvah of Ketzira, of harvesting, of reaping, is in Omer. And the Torah says there, and only in a personal reaping are you going to stop on Shabbos, which tells us the Omer, which is a mitzvah, you will not cease on Shabbos, and you are obligated to do it even on Shabbos. So you see that the mitzvah of Ketzira Omer, of reaping the barley for the Omer, does supersede Shabbos. So too, the Shtei HaLechem would also supersede Shabbos. The Gemara says actually we need mufne, and we've talked about this before. That when we have a Gzeira Shavah, where two words are compared for a teaching, it has to be that there is no question on the comparison. But if there's any question on the comparison, any distinction between the two, then we would need mufna. We'd need it to be that the word is extra. Because if the word is not extra, then who tells you that it's a word comparison? Maybe we just need it for itself, and each one is distinct as we can make a distinction. So over here also mufni, and we're going to have to say that the word is extra. The ilay mufni, because if the word is not extra, it's not superfluous. I can question that Omer, no, there's a specific mitzvah to reap, to cut down the grain. And even if you found cut grain already, still the mitzvah is to cut it that day. And therefore you do it even on Shabbos. It's not really a preparatory act for the mitzvah. It is the mitzvah. Whereas, whereas by the two breads, of course, if he already has wheat cut down for the two breads, he would not need to cut. And so really the cutting, the reaping of the grain of the stalks is really a preparatory act. And so that's a distinction. And so you can't compare the two unless it's extra. Unless the word is superfluous in the pasuk. La'ai afnui. Indeed, it is extra. Afnui mifni. Mechdi, because why is it extra? Sivet says, because it already says in pasuk Yud, in Vayikra 23:10, it already says, and you will bring the omer, the first of your reaping, the first of your harvest, to the kohen. Why then on pasuk Tesvav in 15 does it repeat and it says biyom aviyachem, the day that you will bring the omer? So that bringing is extra because it already says that that's what you're doing. Therefore, it tells us that it's extra, that we learn from there. Bringing the omer is extra to tell us that just as bringing over here allows you to cut and harvest and reap to the barley, so too by the omer, so too by the shtei alechem, when you're going to make the wheat breads, you're allowed to do so even if it requires reaping the stalks and to start the prep work. Well, that's only a superfluous extra word of hava, of bringing, in regards to one side. But if you want to make a word comparison, according to Rabbi Eliezer, you're going to need both sides to be extra in order to make a comparison. We learn, according to Rabbi Eliezer, whose opinion we're in the midst of explaining, that even if one side is extra, you still can make a comparison. However, if there's any distinction that you can make, you can question the comparison and challenge it. So the Gemara says you're right. That even by the two breads, by the shtei alechem of Shavuos, also the word hava'ah is extra. Tavi ribu, it too is extra. Because it says, from your dwelling places you will bring lechem tenufa, and that's extra. It didn't have to say you will bring, because it already says you will bring close to Hashem the mincha chadasha, the new mincha offering, and so it could just say from your households a waving bread. Why does it say after it already says that you bring close to the mizbeach, you bring close to the altar the breads? It says, and you will bring it from your households. It should say from your households. So that taviu is extra, is superfluous to tell us that the word bringing is compared to the word bringing in regards to the omer. And just as by the omer you are obligated to reap the stalks, the barley stalks on Shabbos, so too in the shtei alechem you would be allowed to bring you would allowed to do the prep work, which is harvesting the wheat if you need it. So he said, okay, so we now have, Rabbi Yochanan says, we now see, according to Rabbi Eliezer, other prep work would also be allowed, not only in regards to bris milah, but also other things would be allowed in order to bring in order to tell us that the mitzvah supersedes Shabbos, and you would do not only the mitzvah itself, but also the prep work. And we see that this is true in regards to other mitzvahs, because we see he says so in regards to the shtei halechem, the two breads of Shavuos. So what's excluded? What would not be included in this idea that not only the mitzvah, but also the prep work are allowed on Shabbos? So what do you exclude? Would you say that it excludes a lulav, that even though we're obligated to shake lulav on the first day of Sukkot, and so we have to take it, own it, and shake it, and you don't have a lulav, so you go to your palm tree in your front yard, and you see a nice lulav, and you cut it down on Yontif in order to shake it, and that's excluded, that you're not allowed to do it. It's not true. In fact, Rabbi Eliezer's opinion that you are allowed to cut down that lulav in order to do it. Anything you need to do the mitzvah of a lulav will supersede Shabbos. Rabbi Eliezer. So okay, so maybe it's the first day of sukkah, so you realize, oh my goodness, I didn't build myself a sukkah, or the sukkah came apart, whatever it may be. So you're allowed to build it. And indeed, that's what he says. Sukkah and all its prep work are allowed to be done on Shabbos. So maybe he's saying you can't bake your matzah on Shabbos. It's Friday night. You're at the Seder. You realize you don't have enough matzah, so you're going to go and grind some flour, wheat to make flour, to make a matzah. Are you allowed to do that? Yes, you are. Rabbi Eliezer holds you're allowed to do that too. Even the prep work, not only the matzah. So there's a mitzvah shofar, and you wouldn't be allowed to make a shofar on Shabbos. If you have a shofar, you blow it, but on Rosh Hashanah. But if you don't have it, then you can't make one. No, Rabbi Eliezer says even there, you're allowed to make the shofar on Shabbos if you don't have one in order to blow it on Shabbos, which is Rosh Hashanah. Amar Vada Barava said, indeed, we find all these mitzvahs that according to Rabbi Eliezer, not only is the mitzvah supersede Shabbos, but also the acts that are prohibited generally in Shabbos, but are needed in this case to create a possibility of doing the mitzvah, the prep work to get to the mitzvah, are also going to be will also supersede Shabbos and allowed on Shabbos. So rather, there are two things that are going to be a mitzvah on Shabbos that you're not allowed to do the prep work to get to there, and that is tying tzitzis to your garment, to your talis, and putting a mezuzah up on the house. And these are distinct because each mitzvah is I can do it the next day as well. The mitzvah is not today specifically. I don't have to put on tzitzis today. I don't have to put on mezuzah today. I could have a mitzvah yesterday to put it on. I have a mitzvah tomorrow to put it on as well. And so therefore, there's no mitzvah specifically today. All the other things we're talking about, a bris on the 8th day, the mitzvah is today. The carbon for Shavuos, the two breads, the mitzvah is today. Shofar, Rosh Hashanah, mitzvah is today. Sukkah, the mitzvah is today. Lulav, the mitzvah is today. And so therefore, even the prep work will be done today. Tzitzis, the mitzvah isn't today specifically. I can do it tomorrow. The mitzvah isn't to have a mezuzah today specifically. I could do it tomorrow. I could have done it yesterday. And therefore, since it's not specific to the day, it does not supersede Shabbos.
Isn't Sukkah a 7-day mitzvah?
The first day mitzvah is a mitzvah. There's a mitzvah on the first night of Sukkah to sit in the Sukkah, to eat in the Sukkah.
I'm saying the second night, the third night, that's not midoraisa that you have to sit in the Sukkah?
Well, if I want, I don't have to eat there. First night, I have to eat in the Sukkah. But it's a mitzvah for today, for sure. The first night, you must eat a meal in the Sukkah.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, but
that means that I can't wait and say, you know what, I'll just do it tomorrow. I need a Sukkah tonight.
Shivas Yomim Teishlu V'Sukkos. I was thinking that.
Correct, but that just means that that means that whatever I'm going to do, I should do in a sukkah as opposed to my home. But I don't have to eat if I don't want to eat. I don't have to eat on the rest of the days. Whereas the first night there's a mitzvah to have a meal in the sukkah. I have to wash on a piece of bread. I have to have a meal. There are obligations. Indeed, we have a brisa that concurs with this. They agree. Rabbi Eliezer will agree to the Chachamim that even though he says that a preparatory act for a mitzvah supersedes Shabbos, but if somebody prepared his talis by adding tzitzis to it or putting mezuzah on the house, that would be a prohibition, and if he did so in a Torah prohibited way, he will transgress and need to bring a korban chatas, a sin offering, for having put up the mezuzah on Shabbos. My time, Rav Yosef Fischer, ein kavu lehem zman, because it doesn't have a designated time. The others, today is the day it must be done. Mezuzah could be done tomorrow. Amalei Abaye Adorab. So Abaye said quite the contrary. Ein kavu lehem zman, since there isn't a time specific to it, kol shata v'shata zimneu. Every moment's that time. That means I'll never get back today's ability to wear tzitzis. I'll never get back today's ability to have a mezuzah on my door. That tomorrow will be tomorrow, but it's since the mitzvah isn't at any specific time, that means the mitzvah is at every moment, at all given times, even now, and now will not come back. Rashi says, Rashi adds a fantastic idea here, which is an interesting halacha. Not everybody agrees to this at all, but Rashi says, if I have, just like my house, if I don't have a mezuzah, I've missed this moment of mezuzah. Same too with my garment. If I have a four-corner garment in my drawer without tzitzis on it, every moment I'm transgressing a positive commandment to put tzitzis on my four-corner garment, even if I'm not wearing it.
But that's like saying it's a mitzvah to chetza.
Correct. Fascinating
like
idea that Rashi says here.
We don't hold it like that, right?
I said not everybody agrees to this, but Rashi tells us a fascinating thing here. That according to Rashi, just as a house is obligated to mezuzah at every moment, whether you're in the house or not, since it's your house and it's your living quarters, so too your clothing that have four corners, they're obligated in tzitzis, even if it's sitting in the drawer and you're not wearing it today. In any case, at every moment there's a mitzvah, and therefore his question is: so why should I not be allowed to do it on Shabbos? Because he can exempt himself from the mitzvah. With all of the others, he cannot exempt himself of the mitzvah of lulav today. That's his obligation today. Cannot exempt yourself of the mitzvah of matzah today. That's your obligation today. Sukkah, that's your obligation today. Whereas my house, it's based on my ownership. Get rid of it. Be mafkarit. You have a way to avoid that obligation by hefker, by releasing this from ownership. Same for my clothing, my garment. And therefore, you can't say it supersedes Shabbos because it is not inherently an obligation. It is not absolutely an obligation. Now the Gemara is going to analyze these statements that Rabbi Eliezer said in regards to all the other mitzvahs, that not only the mitzvah itself, but even the prep work will supersede Shabbos. Amar, so the teacher had said, Lulav Shabbos, the lulav and all of its prep, meaning even if you don't have a lulav, you need to cut it down, the lulav itself, and binding it, and everything else that you need to do, will supersede Shabbos. If Rabbi Eliezer, wait, how does Rabbi Eliezer know this? Is he comparing it to the harvesting of the barley for the omer, or the making of the two breads for Shavuos? You can't compare it to those two because they are a part of a mitzvah that goes to the mizbeach. They are part of the service in the Beis Hamikdash. Elam Akra, rather from the pasuk that it says in regards to lulav, it says bayom, and it will be on the day you will take for yourself on the day, the first day of Sukkot, you will take for yourself this pre-Eitz Hadar, the beautiful fruit, kapas tamarim, the palm fronds, Shabbos, and therefore, since it says bayom on that day, even on Shabbos, and in regards to what? Are you talking about just that you're allowed to carry it? Of course not. That can't be it, because the prohibition of moving it would be a muktzah concern. And muktzah is rabbinic. It's not in the Torah. It's a krala mishri tiltul. Would I need a pasuk to tell me you're allowed to carry something, you're allowed to move it? Elo the machshirav. So therefore must be not the lulav itself, handling of the lulav. There is no prohibition. Rather, no Torah prohibition that needs permission from the Torah. Rather, the idea is even to prepare it, meaning even to cut it down and harvest it, which would be a Torah prohibition, since you need it for the mitzvah, it's allowed. For Rabbanan, how the Rabbanan respond to Rabbi Eliezer and say, no, you're not allowed to cut down your lulav on Shabbos if you didn't do it before Shabbos. Now, when we that's to tell you that the shaking of the lulav and its other three species, the four arba minim, is only by day. There's no mitzvah at night. And how does Rabbi Eliezer know that the mitzvah is by day and not by night? Because it says you will be joyous before Hashem, your God, 7 days, not nights. Rabbanan say no. Itzrich, I need that separately. I may have thought that the joy of the harvest would be like the sukkah. Just as the sukkah is 7 days, so too the shaking of the lulav and the joy of the harvest is 7 days. Ma sukkah, malahalan yom afilu leilas, just as the sukkah is by day and by night. Afkan yom afilu leilas, so too over here it's also at night. That's why I need a separate teaching to tell you that the 7 days are also days and not night. Kamash malan. Well, let the Torah only say it by lulav, and we'll learn the rest from there. No, lulav is a very unique mitzvah that requires 4 species, and therefore I cannot compare any other mitzvahs to it. So now we need a special teaching for lulav to tell us that there, not only the mitzvah, but also the prep work is allowed, will supersede Shabbos, allowed to be done on Shabbos, according to Rabbi Eliezer. And Rabbi Eliezer says that we need a separate teaching for Omer and Shtei Halach. Sukkah. Rabbi Eliezer says the same is true for Sukkah. Building your Sukkah, cutting down the schach, all allowed to be done on Shabbos. Minola Rabbi Eliezer, how does he know this? Can you compare it to the Omer, the barley harvest, and the Shtei Halechem, the 2 wheat breads? No, those go to the Beis Hamikdash. That's a need for the up high, and therefore it's not. You can't compare it. There, for sure, it'll supersede. But how do you know even building a sukkah? Amy lulav, and if you're going to learn it from lulav, that's a unique type of mitzvah that requires 4 species. So sukkah maybe would not supersede Shabbos. Rather, we learn it from the comparison of 7 days, 7 days. It says 7 days you will sit in a sukkah. It says 7 days you will be glad and joyous before Hashem on account of the harvest and the shaking of the 4 species. Shabbos, just as the prep work for the lulav supersedes Shabbos, as we learn, as Rabbi Eliezer learns from Bayom, so too over here, and for the sukkah itself, also we'll compare Shivas Yamim, the 7 day, the mitzvah that says 7 days, we'll compare it to say that this too supersedes Shabbos, not only the mitzvah itself, not only sitting in the sukkah, but also prep work. Because sitting in the sukkah, you don't need a teaching that it supersedes Shabbos because there's no prohibition. Must be that it is even the prep work. Well, then the Torah should only write it by sukkah, and I'll learn the others from there. No, this is a unique mitzvah in that you have 7 day mitzvah both by night and by day. And therefore, you can't learn the Omer or the 2 breads from Sukkah. Matzah. We said matzah and all of its prep work also are going to supersede Shabbos. Matzah v'chol machshirei adechnas Shabbos. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. That's what Rabbi Eliezer says. Minola Rabbi Eliezer. And how does he know that? Imi Omer Shtei Halechem. Is he learning it from the barley harvest of the Omer and the or the wheat breads of Shavuos? Shekei tzar kavayat. No. As we said, you can't learn it from there because those for sure supersede Shabbos on account of their part of the service in the Beis Hamikdash. Rather, you want to learn it from lulav. You mean lulav, shekain to an. You can't learn from there because that's a unique mitzvah in that it has 4 species. Imi sukkah. If you want to compare it and learn it from sukkah, shekain, I guess by leilas kaviyavim. No, that's a very unique mitzvah that it applies both by night and by day. Matzah is a specific mitzvah only by night, even though, according to many, you do fulfill a mitzvah by eating matzah all 7 days, but there's no obligation to eat all 7 days. There's only an obligation one time. the night of the Seder, the Leil Pesach. That's when there's a mitzvah to eat matzah. The rest of the time you fulfill a mitzvah by eating it, but there's no obligation in eating it. And so it only applies by night, not by day. So rather, we're going to learn that on account of we compare the 15th of Pesach, the 15th of the month by Sukkot. The Torah says 15th by each, just as Ma'alahala Machshireh Dechet is a Shabbos, Afka Machshireh Dechet is a Shabbos. Just as the mitzvah, the prep work, supersedes Shabbos, so too the prep work in regards to matzah is going to supersede Shabbos. Well, then just write it by matzah and we'll learn the others from here. No, the uniqueness of the mitzvah of matzah is that it applies to both men and women, whereas the dwelling in the sukkah, women are exempt as it's a time-bound mitzvah, and usually time-bound mitzvahs women are exempt of the mitzvah. Matzah, they're obligated in the mitzvah. So that uniqueness of that mitzvah makes it that I could not learn the others from here, and so the Torah had to tell me separately, according to Rabbi Eliezer, that there's a prep work for that would supersede Shabbos. This comparison, the Gemara does not ask what the Chachamim do with that, because actually the Chachamim also compare the 15th and the 15th, but for other mitzvahs, like we mentioned, the first night of Sukkot, there's an obligation to eat in the sukkah, whereas the rest of the days you don't have to eat in the sukkah. You're allowed to, if you're going to eat, that's the place you need to eat, but you don't have to eat. Whereas the first night of Sukkot you have to, just as the first night of Pesach there's a mitzvah of matzah. Shofar blowing the shofar and any prep work you need in order to get a shofar are allowed to be done on Shabbos. How does Rabbi Eliezer know this? Is he learning it from the barley harvest, the omer, or the two breads of Shavuos? No, you can't compare it to that, because that's, as we said, a part of the service in the Beis Hamikdash. You mean lulav? Are you going to compare it to lulav? Can't compare it to that because it requires a fourth species. You can't learn it from sukkah because that's unique in that it is a mitzvah both by day and by night. And you can't compare it to matzah because matzah is unique in that even though it's a time-out mitzvah, even women are obligated, whereas they are exempt of mitzvahs, generally of mitzvahs that are time-bound. Ela makra, rather he learns it from this pasuk. Yom teruah yihi alechem, a day of shofar blast, it shall be to you. The yom, it is a day, afilu b'Shabbos, even if it is Shabbos. And the blast itself can't be the mitzvah, what the Torah is including, because the blast itself is not a Torah prohibition. Well, in regards to what do we need to say that you do it even on Shabbos? Is it for the blowing of the shofar? We already learned in the academy in Shmuel, so the Torah says you may not do creative work. What's not included in creative work, meaning what kind of work is a skill but not creative? Yatzot kiyah shofar. Blowing the shofar would not be included in creative work because you're not creating anything, but rather it's a skill, something you know, or a dias apas, and similarly removing the bread that's stuck to the wall of the oven, the way they would slap a dough on the wall and let it bake and then remove it without falling into the coal that's beneath it. Shehi chachma, these are skills, but they're not creative work. So that's not included when the Torah says that you do it even, by day, the day of a shofar blast, to tell you that even on Shabbos, it can't be to tell you the blowing of the shofar, because that's not a Torah prohibition, so I don't need a pasuk to tell me that it's permissible on Shabbos. Rather, what is the Torah coming to teach me that would have been prohibited, and now, on account of the word bayom, this day, that it has to be done today, is permissible? Hello, the must be coming to tell us that the prep work of making a shofar, of hollowing it out and carving it, everything would be permissible on Erev, on Shabbos itself, in order to have a shofar for Rosh Hashanah. Rabbana. What did the Rabbana do with this word bayom? That's to tell you that blowing the shofar is during the daytime and not at night. And how does Rabbi Eliezer know that? that the shofar is to be blown by day and not by night. Nafkalei b'yom haKippurim taviru shofar b'atzechem. We know that in the Yovel, on Yom Kippur, you blew the shofar as well. And that there it says, on the day of Yom Kippur, you will blow the shofar. V'gamri ma'adad, you learn the shofar of Rosh Hashanah from the shofar of Yom Kippur, that they were both by day. Okay, fine. So now we know shofar supersedes Shabbos not only in the blowing, which wouldn't be prohibited on Shabbos anyhow, must be that it supersedes even in the prep. Well then, let's learn the others from here. You can't learn it from shofar. Why? Shofar is unique because that brings the occurrences, the remembrances of all of our acts before Avinu Shebeshamayim, our Father in heaven. So learn it from Yom Kippur. The Lekel Amigmari, you can't learn from me there. The Amar Tiku, talk about the Shofar Niftar Avodim Lebateim, Masalas Chazos Lebaaleim, that the shofar of Yom Kippur, which brings freedom to everyone, is unique in that the blow of the shofar changes the entire structure, the economic structure of the Jewish world. Every field goes back to its inheritance owner, and every indentured servant goes back home to their families. So it is a freedom day. The shofar is so unique, and therefore that supersedes Shabbos is not going to teach me that also other mitzvahs supersede Shabbos. So we need, according to Rabbi Eliezer, who says not only the mitzvah, but even the prep work supersedes Shabbos. All of these need their own teaching.